G'day guys, and welcome back to the VemoTrader So You Want to Be a Scalper series. My name is Reese, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking to you guys about leverage. Now, this is something that comes up a lot. We get a lot of requests for people wanting to change their leverage in Vema. Now, you can't currently do that. It is probably something we will introduce in the future, but it's not a priority at the moment for reasons I'll probably tangentially cover in this video. At the end of the day, there are potentially valid reasons to want to change your leverage or your max leverage from what we set it at, but I feel like the vast majority of the time when people are asking us how they change their leverage and saying they want to change their leverage, it's because they're thinking that changing their leverage is going to do things for them that it's just not going to do. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. We had a question last week about wanting to lower your leverage to reduce slippage, and the answer is that doesn't really work. So I'm going to explore why that doesn't really work in this video and talk about, there is kind of one exception to that rule. So I'll talk about the exception to that rule. So what we'll do is we'll head to VemoTrader and we'll get started.
So we're going to start with the stop loss, because your stop loss percentage is what is going to actually determine your leverage, right? There's a few other things that go into it, but it is really the thing that does make the biggest contribution to what the leverage that you're going to use on your trade is. Now, we had a question the other day about what's a good stop loss? What stop loss should I use? And my answer to that was, that's not a question that I can answer, right? Your stop loss will depend on your trading style, your trade plan, what you've backtested, what you found to be profitable. So for me, I'm a big market structure man. So I love, look at this lower high. That was what I was trading. I'll be putting my stop loss somewhere up here. You might use EMAs. You might use the standard error bands, which are kind of like a Bollinger Band. You might use fibs. I'm a big fan of a fib stop loss when I am fib trading. So I might use something like the 78.6. But at the end of the day, there's no, one stop loss. It's not a one size fits all operation. It's going to depend very heavily on your trade plan, on your style, and also on the time frame that you're trading. So we can see if we go back to that fib trade, let's say that we were to enter from the 61.8 and we were to exit or have our stop loss just a little bit above the 78.6. Usually when I'm doing it, I would, go a little bit higher because of that wick. If there was wicks higher, then I would allow for them. So let's just make it a 2% stop loss, make it nice and easy. So on the 4 hour, using the fibs from the 61.8 to the 78.6, we have a 2% stop loss in this case. But you can see if we were to go down to the 1 minute time frame and get rid of our risk to reward tool, if we look for something similar, so the recent move down, we draw fibs on, and we took the exact same trade, right? 61.8 to 78.6. You're now looking at a 0.06, so something like a 30th of the size of the stop loss that we're looking at on the 4 hour. So that's going to massively change the leverage used because it's a much smaller stop loss. It's going to have much higher leverage than that previous one that was about 2%. So at the end of the day, your stop loss needs to be where it needs to be. Now, the reason your stop loss is that crucial first step is because it is your stop loss and your account balance that will determine your position size. And this is really the crux of the problem, right, is the position size. So let's say that we have a $1,000 account and we're using 1% account risk. That means we want to be risking $10. So on that 4 hour trade before, we had a 2% stop loss. So to risk to risk $10 with a 2% stop loss, there is only one position size that can do that. Now, how we find that is we go, okay, we want 2% of our position size to equal $10. So we can go our position size must equal 10 divided by 0.02, because that is a percentage, that is 2% represented as a decimal, which means our position size has to be $500. Because if we lose 2% of $500, it means we will lose $10, which is what we're trying to risk in the first place. Leverage, you can see that leverage hasn't been a factor so far because it doesn't change anything to do with your position size. Position size is what is actually set by your account risk, your stop loss percentage, and your account balance. And that is the key, right? Position size is the absolute key here. So to give you guys an example of why slippage is the same, regardless of leverage for the same position size, I've drawn up a little example. So this is something that I like to think of, or a way that I like to think of your margin on a trade, right? So there's two ways, well, I mean, it's almost infinite, but let's pretend that we go for this $500 position size in two different ways. On one trade, we use 100x leverage. We have our margin as $5 and our position size is $500, right? 5 times 100, 500. On the other trade, we have our leverage at 10 times. So our margin is going to be more because we don't have as much leverage to work with. So we're going to need $50, and our position size is then going to be $500. So how I like to think about this is if you imagine these little grey or white boxes as being your margin. They are your margin. You can see that the one on the right has much more margin, right? Roughly 10 times, I didn't actually measure it up, but roughly 10 times the margin as the one on the left. The liquidation price is going to be that little red line. So usually on a really high leverage trade, your liquidation price will be much closer or will require less of your margin to be burnt up before you hit your liquidation price. So I'll put it about 50% of the way through that one. So we'll call that like a $2.50 loss of margin. And on this one here on the right, we have lower leverage, which usually means that your liquidation price is further into your drawdown. So we've gone for about 80% there. So if we imagine that we were in two identical trades, right? And they go against us and they hit our stop loss. Let's say that our $10 loss has already happened, right? That is where, so we're in a long, let's pretend. We're in a long, price comes down, and this price right here, in fact, we'll go for this one, is our stop loss. Now, what's going to happen if we see slippage is this. So let's get a new line and call this the slippage price. So this is the price that we actually exit the trade at, right? We've seen some slippage. This is the price that we are exiting the trade at, and let's put this one on the top just to try and keep them a little bit separate. So there's a few things that can happen here. So if we see slippage that is above the liquidation price of both positions, right? So something like this, in fact, let's put it like there, something like that. If that's what we see, then both positions will lose the exact same amount. Let's call it $1, because at the end of the day, you have to close out that position size of $500, which means that regardless of your leverage, you have to go into the book. So let's say what we were in a long, our stop loss been hit. So we need, we are selling, we need buy orders, right? We need buy limits in the book to fill our stop loss against. Regardless of whether we're on 100x or 10x, we need $500 worth of liquidity in the books to sell into. So we're going to cop the exact same slippage on those two trades. We're going to lose that extra $1 regardless of what our leverage was. Where things do start to get different is once you get to the liquidation price. So let's say that we get to here and we hit the liquidation price. Well, we've already established that the liquidation price was at a loss of about $2.50 of this margin. So what we know then is that the 10x trade has lost $2.50, right? In fact, I'll draw this one up. So 10x trade loses $2.50, right? Because we established that was where the liquidation price of the other trade was. But the 5x trade, the 100x trade is actually going to lose more than $2.50 because it's going to be liquidated, right? And when you're liquidated on isolated margin, which currently are all the contracts that we have, and we don't have FTX, if you're liquidated on isolated margin, that means you lose all of your margin, right? Our margin was $5, so we actually lose $5 here. So in that case, it was actually much better to be on that much lower leverage because it meant we didn't get liquidated, so we didn't quite lose as much margin. But things start to change when we go further. So let's imagine that slippage actually was greater than that and came all the way down to, let's say, here, because it makes things nice and easy for me, right? Well, in this case, we've been liquidated on the trade on the left because price has gotten to our liquidation price. We've been liquidated over here. So liquidated, lost all $5 because that was all of our margin. That was all we could lose because we are on isolated margin. But in this example, we're actually going to lose more than $5 because we have $50 worth of margin to burn up to. And we've probably gone, let's call that a quarter. We've gone a quarter of the way through that. So we have actually lost $12.50. So you can see in this case, it's actually better to be liquidated. Now, it's one of those things, right? How do you decide whether to use high or low leverage? Because you don't know where slippage is going to occur to. Because this is the thing with slippage, right? You don't know it's going to occur. You can always, sort of suspect it, but you don't know for sure it's going to occur. And two, you have no idea the scale of it because in highly volatile moves, the slippage will be much worse. And in that case, you would have been better off being on this 100x trade and being liquidated. But if it was just, a little bit of slippage, but enough that it would have hit the liquidation of the 100x trade, you would have been much better off being in that 10x trade because you would have lost half as much to slippage. It lost $5. The 100x trade lost $5 and the 10x trade lost $2.50. So at the end of the day, slippage is not related to your leverage, right? It is purely related to your position size and your leverage is independent of that. There are two ways we got to this position size. We did it with 100x leverage and $5 margin, and we did it with 10x leverage and $50 margin. Both of those trades would see the exact same slippage occur on the exchange. The potential difference would be to do with that sort of, did it hit the liquidation price of one? Because if it doesn't hit the liquidation price of either, you're going to lose the exact same amount due to slippage as what you would have lost either way. So this ties in really well with my video from, I think it was last week, could have been 2 weeks ago, where I spoke about what happens when you hit the maximum leverage and we have to tie up more of your margin to get you to the position size. Because you can imagine, if we've done that, you have so much more of this margin to lose in the event of there being slippage. So I hope that sort of helps clear up some of the reasons that leverage is not going to help with slippage necessarily. And I really hope that helps show you guys, slippage is inherently part of scalping. It's kind of part of trading in general, but it's much more prominent when you are scalping. Changing your leverage is not going to do anything for slippage. You're still going to cop the exact same slippage anytime. Righto, so to finish off, I just thought of a really quick and easy way to show you guys what I'm talking about when I am talking about why it is all about the position size and not the leverage. And again, we come to the order book. So we're currently looking at OKX's Bitcoin USDT swap, their perpetual contract. So we had a $500 position before. Now let's imagine that we have a 5,000 contract position, all right? Doesn't matter how we got there. Again, we could have used 100x leverage. We could have used 10x leverage. We could have used 1x leverage. We now have a 5,000 contract position. You can see that I'm going to cop slippage in the order book. It's going to push price from currently 200. Oh, that just changed on me. That was about 21,811 to what was 21,813. But you can see that to get the 5,000 contracts, and we can see that in the total contract column over on the right-hand side, we have to buy a long way up the order book. So you imagine if your stop loss got hit on a short, you have to look for limit buys, which is what the order book's currently showing you, is the limit buys in the order in the order book. So you need to find that 5,000 contracts regardless of what your leverage was, and you can see how that would be causing significant slippage at the moment. So hopefully that really shows you guys what I mean when I say it is all about the position size. That is what's causing the slippage, and the leverage is not actually going to change the slippage. It might change the outcome of the slippage, as I showed with the liquidation examples, but it will not change the slippage that you cop.
Righto guys, so hopefully that has helped clear up why slippage is all about position size, and changing your leverage is not necessarily going to improve the results you get when you do cop that slippage. So that is it for the So You Want to Be a Scalper series currently, right? There might be things that come in the future, but for now, I think this is the end of the series. So hopefully this has really opened your eyes to why scalping is definitely still a potentially profitable method of trading, but just one that does carry a lot of extra complications, a lot of things that do make it more difficult to have a profitable scalping strategy when comparing it to a higher time frame strategy. Have a great day, happy trading, and I'll talk to you guys very soon.